I stood at the foot of the bed, my fingers trembling as I reached for a pack of cigarettes that wasn't there. It took me a moment, breathing in the heavy, musky scent of the room, to remember that I hadn't started smoking yet. Not in this timeline. 5 minutes ago, the crushing weight of reality had settled on me. I was back. I was alive. And I was staring at Charles, sound asleep, his chest rising and falling in a slow, peaceful rhythm. The moonlight washed over him, turning his skin into polished marble. He looked so young, so unbroken. His arms were smooth, devoid of the 11 jagged, serpentine scars that would one day mar them. He was whole. I looked down at the mess on the floor. It was a disaster zone of discarded clothes and shattered inhibitions. My lower back throbbed with a dull ache, a physical reminder of the madness that had taken place over the last few hours. We had just finished. The air was still thick with the smell of us, the rich, cedarwood depth of his alpha pheromones tangling with my own distress. I rubbed my face, trying to scrub away the ghost of the future. I had been reborn, thrown back exactly 1 year before my death. But the timing. God, the timing was catastrophic. I had woken up right after sleeping with my best friend. This night. This specific, intoxicating, disastrous night. It was the night our decade-long secret mutual pining had finally snapped. It was the night that started the slide toward the tragedy that ruined us both. I couldn't let it happen. Not again. I moved silently, gathering the evidence. I picked up my torn shirt, wincing at the sound of the fabric rustling. I collected his scattered clothes, folding them with shaking hands, smoothing out the wrinkles as if I could smooth out the timeline itself. I grabbed the empty wine bottle, the catalyst for this beautiful mistake, and sprinkled the last few drops around the room to mask the scent of sex with the sharp tang of alcohol. "Don't wake up," I whispered to the air, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Please, Charles, don't wake up." At 5 in the morning, I slipped out of his bedroom like a thief. I crept across the hall to my own apartment, my legs weak, my body aching in ways that were both pleasurable and terrifying. I closed my door, leaned my back against the cold wood, and slid down to the floor. I sat there in the dark foyer, burying my face in my knees, and wept. He was okay. He was alive. He was healthy, vibrant, and happy. The car accident hadn't happened. The suicide hadn't happened. Everything was fixable. But I had to kill this. I had to kill us before we could destroy him. My mind flashed back to earlier in the night. The memories were vivid, etched into my bones. We had been celebrating the opening of his art studio. He was drunk on champagne and success. I had helped him to his room, intending to get him a glass of water, but as I turned to leave, his fingers had hooked into my belt loop. He had sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes glassy and unfocused, a lopsided grin splitting his face. "Mark," he had slurred, his voice dropping an octave, rumbling in his chest. "I am so happy right now." "I know," I had said, trying to pry his fingers loose. "You did it, Charles. The studio is going to be great." "No," he whispered, tugging me closer until I was standing between his knees. "Not just that. Grandma is stable. My career is. It's happening. And you." He looked up at me, his eyes dark and intense. "You're always right here. I think I'm the luckiest man in the world." He had said that so many times tonight. And I, like a fool, had indulged him. "You're drunk, Charles," I had said softly. If I wanted. His hand had slid down, his long, painter's fingers grazing the zipper of my jeans. The air in the room had suddenly grown hot, charged with static. His eyes lost their innocent glaze, darkening with a hunger I had never seen directed at me. If I wanted to be even happier, would that be too greedy? The tension had snapped. The ambiguity dissolved. My body had answered before my brain could protest. He was drunk, yes. But I was sober. I was stone-cold sober, and the overwhelming joy of realizing my best friend wanted me back had crushed my rationality. I had let myself fall. I had let us tangle together, skin against skin, until the sun threatened to rise. But if I hadn't run away just now, if I had stayed, I knew the script. In the original timeline, Charles woke up with the sun. He didn't panic. He didn't regret it. He looked from the ceiling to me, his expression shifting from confusion to a calm, determined certainty. "Did we sleep together?" he had asked, his voice rough with sleep. "Yeah," I had whispered. He had looked at the marks on my skin, his masterpieces. He had leaned down, kissing the hollow of my throat. It's beautiful, he had murmured. But it feels incomplete. The parts one missed while I was drunk. Let a sober me fill in the blanks. And God, the sober Charles was dangerous. While the drunk Charles was force and instinct, the sober Charles was deliberate. He was a grinder, a slow burn that consumed everything. He had buried his face in my neck, inhaling my scent, and whispered the words that would haunt me forever. Mark, he had groaned. I think I could die right now and have no regrets. We were so naive. We thought it was the beginning of a fairy tale. We didn't know it was the opening chapter of a horror story. A sharp buzz from the doorbell jolted me awake. I gasped, my body screaming in protest. I had fallen asleep on the hardwood floor of my foyer. Sunlight was streaming through the peephole. It was noon. Mark, a voice came through the door, muffled but unmistakable. Are you in there? It was Charles. Panic flared in my chest. I scrambled up, ignoring the stiffness in my limbs, and ran to my bedroom. I threw on a pair of pajamas, splashed water on my face, and frantically sprayed cologne over my neck to hide the lingering scent of him. I took a deep breath, composed my face into a mask of exhaustion, and opened the door. Charles stood there in a loose white t-shirt. He looked fresh, but there was a nervous energy radiating off him. His eyes darted over my face, searching. There was hesitation there, but also a flicker of hope. Hey, I said, forcing a yawn. What's up? He shifted his weight, rubbing the back of his neck. Last night. Was I pretty wasted? Yeah. I laughed, the sound brittle in my own ears. You were a mess. Next time, cut yourself off after the second bottle. Charles licked his lips. His Adam's apple bobbed. He clearly wasn't interested in a lecture on sobriety. Did I? Did I do anything weird? I scratched my cheek, feigning confusion. Weird? Like what? I don't know, he murmured, stepping a little closer. I have these flashes. You brought me home. And then you passed out. I lied. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he could hear it. You spilled wine on your shirt, so I took it off for you. Then you started snoring like a chainsaw, so I came back here. He stared at me. He was looking for a crack in the armor, a blush, a stutter. But I had lived through hell and back. I knew how to wear a mask. Oh, he said softly. The light in his eyes dimmed. So, it really was just a dream? I hesitated for a split second, the urge to tell him the truth clawing at my throat. But then I saw the phantom image of him in a wheelchair, staring blankly at a wall, his life destroyed because of me. Must have been a wild dream, I said dismissively. Charles let out a breath that was half sigh, half shudder. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Yeah, I guess so. The disappointment on his face was visceral. It hurt to look at him. I hadn't seen him this expressive in so long. My last memory of him was in the hospital waiting room, before I took the pills. He had looked so small in that chair. Mark, he had asked that day, staring out the window at the green trees, was I wrong to love you? I hadn't answered him then. I had walked away, gone home, and swallowed a bottle of blood pressure medication. Mark, Charles's voice snapped me back to the present. He was staring at my neck. I froze. I had missed a spot. What's that on your neck? He asked, his voice dropping, sharpening. I instinctively clapped a hand over the reddish-purple bruise near my collarbone. I forced a laugh. Ugh, don't get me started. I left the window open last night. Mosquitoes ate me alive. I spent half the night hunting the little bastards. I smiled. I smiled with all the brightness of a man who had practiced lying in the mirror for 6 months. Charles didn't look convinced. His eyes narrowed slightly, tracing the line of my jaw, but he didn't push. He couldn't. Not without admitting what he hoped it was. Right, he said slowly. Well, Grandma is being discharged today. She wanted to know if you'd come with me to pick her up. The word grandma hit me like a physical blow. The smile froze on my face. Today, I stammered. I looked down at my phone, swiping aimlessly. Oh man, I'd love to really, but I can't. I have a date. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. A date, Charles repeated. His voice was flat. With who? Do I know her? You don't, I said quickly. It's new. I'm trying to keep it low profile for now. You know how it is. If it works out, I'll introduce you. Charles blinked slowly, like a computer processing a fatal error. I don't understand. You've never mentioned anyone. Well, we're not kids anymore, Charles, I said, leaning against the doorframe, trying to look casual. I'm getting older. I want to settle down. Have a family. Grandma keeps telling me I need to find a nice girl, right? I saw the flinch. It was minute, a twitch of his jaw muscle, but I saw it. Charles's family history was a tragedy written in bold font. His father was a gambler who jumped off a building. His mother fled. Grandma raised him. We were neighbors. When my parents worked late, Grandma would call me over. She'd feed me milk and cookies, sew my buttons, and treat me like her own. You too, she used to say, fanning herself while we did homework. Look after each other. Always. She didn't know looking after each other would end up with us tangled in sheets. When Charles came out of the closet, Grandma looked at me with eyes that had lost their light. Mark, she had said, her voice trembling. I treated you like half a grandson. That sentence was the nightmare that woke me up screaming. Yeah, Charles said finally. His voice sounded hollow. Grandma would want that. A nice family. Exactly, I said, my cheerfulness tasting like bile. So you go get her. Give her my love. I started to close the door. Mark, he said, stopping the door with his hand. Yeah. Are you happy? I looked at him. I looked at the man I had loved for 10 years, the man I had died for, the man I was currently breaking into pieces to save. I'm trying to be, I said. I closed the door. Later that evening, I sat in a booth at a trendy cafe, watching my cousin Lena suck down an iced latte. Okay, let me get this straight, Lena said, pointing a fry at me. I get paid an hourly rate to pretend to be your girlfriend, and all I have to do is look pretty and maybe hold your hand if we run into your neighbor? Essentially, I said, stirring my drink. And you have to look like you adore me. Easy money, she grinned. But why? Is he a stalker? Does he owe you money? He's persistent, I said. He's my best friend. And he's in love with me. Lena raised an eyebrow. And this is a problem, because he's an alpha. I snapped, harsher than I intended. And I'm an omega. And if we're together, it destroys his life. His grandmother will never accept it. It ruins his career. I've seen it, Lena. I've seen how it ends. Okay. She held up her hands. Drama queen. Got it. Tragic romance. I'm just the beard. She glanced over my shoulder and her eyes widened. Speaking of drama, isn't that the guy? My blood ran cold. I didn't turn around. Where? Walking in. He looks intense. Like murders someone intense. I risked a glance. It wasn't Charles. It was a man I recognized from my past life. The con artist who had dated Lena, drained her bank account, and left her a shell of herself. I stood up so fast I knocked the table. Mark, Lena asked, startled. The man was walking toward a different booth, scanning the room. I intercepted him. Hey, I shouted. The man turned, surprised. Excuse me. Get out, I snarled. I stepped into his space, letting a burst of aggressive pheromones flare. It was reckless, but I didn't care. Get the hell out of here and don't come back. Buddy, you got a problem? The guy sneered. Yeah, I do. I said, my voice low and dangerous. I know who you are. I know what you do. If you even look at anyone in this cafe, I will call the cops and I will personally make sure you never walk straight again. The man blinked, unsettled by the sheer venom in my voice. He looked around, saw people staring, and scoffed. Freak. He turned and walked out. I stood there, panting, my hands shaking. Mark, Lena was tugging on my sleeve. What the hell was that? That guy was cute. He's a parasite, I hissed, spinning on her. He's garbage. You stay away from men like that, do you hear me? Okay. Jesus, calm down. She looked at me with new eyes. I've never seen you like that. You're usually such a doormat. I sat back down, burying my face in my hands. I'm not a doormat anymore. I can't afford to be. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Charles. Grandma fell. We're at the hospital. The world tilted. We have to go, I said, grabbing my keys. What? Where? Hospital. Now. The drive was a blur of rain and terror. I drove like a maniac, Lena gripping the handle and screaming at me to slow down. But all I could see was the text. Grandma fell. In the last timeline, Grandma's health was the leverage she used against us. Her decline was the weapon that bled Charles dry. If she died now. If she died because I was messing with the timeline. I skidded into the hospital parking lot. We ran to the ER waiting room. Charles was leaning against the wall, looking pale. When he saw me, he straightened up. His eyes went immediately to Lena, who was breathless and clinging to my arm. How is she? I demanded, breathless. Charles's gaze lingered on Lena's hand on my arm. His jaw tightened. Doctor says she's stable. Just a bad fall. They want to keep her for observation. Thank God, I breathed. I slumped against a chair. You got here fast, Charles said, his voice devoid of emotion. I didn't think you'd interrupt your date. It's Grandma, I said. Of course I came. This is Lena? Charles asked, looking at my cousin. Hi, Lena said, offering a small, awkward wave. Mark's told me so much about you. Has he? Charles said flatly. He looked at me. You should go in and see her. I froze. I couldn't face her. Not after knowing that in another life, I was the reason she swallowed a bottle of pills. I can't. Not right now. I just needed to know she was safe. Charles stared at me. Mark, she's asking for you. I can't. I backed away. I have to. Lena has to get home. We have plans. Tell her I'll come by tomorrow. I grabbed Lena's hand and dragged her away. I felt Charles's eyes burning a hole in my back until the elevator doors closed. That night, the storm broke. Thunder rattled the windows of my apartment. Rain lashed against the glass like shrapnel. I sat on my couch, curled into a ball, staring at the dark. The power had gone out an hour ago. I hated the dark. It was a childhood trauma, being locked in a closet by bullies. Charles knew. Charles always knew. In the past, whenever the power went out, he'd be at my door in seconds with a flashlight and a reassuring smile. But not tonight. Tonight, I had pushed him away. I had introduced him to my girlfriend. I had rejected him. I wrapped my arms around my knees, rocking back and forth. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch and twist, turning into monsters. I couldn't breathe. The air felt thin. Suddenly, a beam of light cut through the darkness. I gasped, looking up. The door to my apartment, which I had forgotten to lock in my panic, swung open. A figure stood there, backlit by the lightning flashing in the hallway. He was soaking wet, water dripping from his hair, his chest heaving. Charles, I whispered. He didn't say a word. He stepped inside, kicking the door shut behind him. The beam of the flashlight swung wildly, blinding me for a second before settling on my face. You're afraid of the dark, he said. His voice was rough, raw. I'm fine, I said, my voice trembling. Go back to the hospital. Grandma needs you. Grandma is sleeping, he said. He walked toward me, his boots heavy on the floor. I couldn't stay there. I knew you'd be sitting here, scared out of your mind. He reached the couch and knelt in front of me. The flashlight sat on the coffee table, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. The smell of him, rain, ozone, and that deep, overpowering alpha cedar wood filled the small space. I brought you a light, he said softly. I looked at him. He looked wrecked. His eyes were red-rimmed. Why are you doing this? I asked, tears pricking my eyes. I have a girlfriend, Charles. You need to stop. Do you? He asked. He reached out, his hand hovering near my knee. Do you really? Yes, I lied. I love her. Liar. The word hung in the air. I saw you tonight, Charles said, his voice dropping to a growl. At the hospital. You didn't look at her the way you look at me. You didn't smell like her. You still smell like me. My heart stopped. That's not. I can smell it, Mark, he whispered. He leaned forward, invading my space. Under that cheap cologne you bathed in. You smell like my rut. You smell like what we did. Stop it. I whimpered, pressing back into the cushions. It was a mistake. Was it? He moved fast. Before I could react, he was looming over me, trapping me between his arms. He didn't touch me, but the heat radiating from him was suffocating. Tell me to leave, he challenged. Look me in the eye and tell me you don't want me, and I will walk out that door and never come back. I opened my mouth to say the words. I don't want you. It was the only way to save him. But the words wouldn't come. I looked at his wet hair, the desperation in his eyes, the way his lips parted slightly. I choked. Mark, he pleaded. Please. I'm going crazy. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I remember your skin. I remember the taste of you. Don't tell me I imagined it. He leaned in. His lips brushed against my ear. Why are you crying? He whispered. I hadn't realized I was crying until his thumb brushed a tear from my cheek. Because it's impossible, I sobbed. We can't. Grandma. Your career. It all falls apart if you choose me. Screw my career, he said fiercely. And Grandma. She just wants me to be happy. You are my happiness, Mark. You always have been. You don't understand. I pushed against his chest. I ruin you. In every version of this story, I ruin you. He froze. What are you talking about? Before I could answer, before I could spill the insane truth about time travel and rebirth, my phone lit up on the table. Hospital. We both looked at it. Grandma, Charles said, the heat instantly draining from his face. We rushed back to the hospital in silence. The tension in the car was thick enough to choke on. When we arrived, the doctor met us in the hallway. She's awake, the doctor said. She was murmuring names. Charles. And Mark. We went in. Grandma looked tiny in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors. She opened her eyes as we approached. They weren't cloudy anymore. They were sharp, terrifyingly clear. Grandma, Charles said, taking her hand. I'm here. She didn't look at him. She looked at me. Mark, she rasped. I stepped forward, my head bowed. I'm here, Grandma. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I had a dream, she interrupted. Her voice was weak but steady. A terrible dream. I was in a place where you left. You went away. I went cold. In the dream, she continued, her eyes locking onto mine. Charles stopped painting. He sat in a chair by the window and waited. He waited for years. He withered away. She squeezed Charles's hand, but kept looking at me. He broke. Because I told him he couldn't have you. Charles looked from her to me, confusion knitting his brow. Grandma, I saw it. She whispered, tears leaking from her eyes. I saw my boy destroy himself because I was too stubborn to let him love who he wanted. She took a shaky breath. Mark, she said. Come here. I walked to the side of the bed. She reached out and took my hand, placing it on top of Charles's. Her skin was paper-thin and dry. Don't go, she said fiercely. Don't you dare go anywhere. If you leave him, he dies. I saw it. He dies inside. I stared at her, shock paralyzing me. She had seen the other timeline. Somehow, in her coma, she had bridged the gap. Grandma, I choked out. Are you saying? I'm saying, she closed her eyes, exhausted, that I would rather have a happy grandson with a boyfriend than a dead grandson with a secret. Be with him. Just be good to him. The silence in the room was deafening. The only sound was the steady beep of the heart monitor. Charles turned to me. He didn't ask questions about the dream. He didn't ask why Grandma was saying these things. He just looked at our joined hands, then up at my face. Did you hear her? He asked softly. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I heard her. So, Charles said, stepping closer, ignoring the hospital setting, ignoring everything but me. No more excuses? No more fake girlfriends? No, I whispered. No more. He didn't kiss me. Not there. He just pulled me into a hug so tight, I thought my ribs would crack. He buried his face in my neck, right over the scent gland, and inhaled deeply. Finally, he breathed against my skin. Finally. A week later, I walked into the old basement studio. It smelled of turpentine and linseed oil. Canvases were stacked against every wall. I moved through them, looking for Charles. I found him in the back corner. He was painting. He was moving with a fluidity and confidence that I hadn't seen in the other timeline. There was no tremor in his hand. No hesitation. He was painting me. It was a portrait from that night. I was asleep, the sheets tangled around my waist, moonlight illuminating the curve of my spine. It was intimate. It was raw. It was love made visible. You're staring, Charles said without turning around. It's a bit narcissist of me to stare at my own face, isn't it? I teased, walking up behind him. He put down his brush and turned. He looked tired, but happy. Truly happy. I have a whole series, he said, gesturing to the stack. I couldn't stop. I was afraid if I stopped painting you, you'd disappear again. I reached out and touched the paint-stained apron he wore. I'm not going anywhere. Good, he said. He caught my hand and kissed the knuckles. Because I did some math. The nurse bills for Grandma. They're going to be high. I know, I said. I've got savings. I'll pay half. Half. He raised an eyebrow. As a friend. No, I said, stepping into his space, wrapping my arms around his neck. I looked up into those dark, intense eyes, the eyes of my prime alpha, my partner, my future. As family, Charles smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through the clouds after a year of rain. Family, he agreed. He leaned down and kissed me. It tasted like paint and coffee and second chances. Outside, the city bustled on, unaware that in a small basement studio, two people had just rewritten destiny. I love you, Mark, he whispered against my lips. I love you too, Charles, I said back. In this life and every other one.